Hi everyone, and thank you for choosing this session over the other two, which were also great quality. I saw Mr. Philip Kren in one of the other talks. Great guy. I've been to his talks multiple times, so I hope that session will be videotaped so that I can watch it later. My name is Hanno, and I'm going to tell you a bit about Spring Boot and also about Spring Boot version 2, which only was released last month. And I also want to try to build a Spring Boot application in the next 50 minutes. Emphasis on try. I hope it's working at the end. Most of the times it does. And I've done this talk also in 40 minutes, so a bit less time. So in theory, this is possible. But I really need you guys and girls to help me out a bit. In a few ways, actually. For starters, when I make a mistake during the live coding and you see it, please raise your hand and I'll try to fix it. And I'm bound to make a few mistakes. So there's my disclaimer. Secondly, Spring Boot is quite flexible when it comes to dependencies and using multiple frameworks like databases or template engines or other libraries. And I really need you guys to help me define the requirements for the application. So internet connectivity permitting, I'll try to organize this using an online voting system. And if the internet fails us, we'll just do it by making ourselves heard, like applauding or something, or just yelling out what you want to see. I think we will make it work. So tiny bit about myself, because let's face it, you just want to hear me talk about Spring Boot and not about myself, at least not for very long. So my name is Hanno, I'm from the Netherlands. I work for InfoSupport as a Java lead developer, sometimes also software developer. I've been a Scrum Master a few times. Also train people at our company, mostly on Java-related technologies. Now also, before we get started, I need to know a tiny bit about you guys. So can I see some hands? Who has worked with the classic Spring framework before? A lot of you guys. Yeah, so it's like the custom XML configurations, Java annotations in later version of Spring. And who has worked with Spring Boot before? Okay. Yeah, that's like half of you guys. So I'm going to assume that it was with Spring Boot version 1. Is that correct? Never assume, right? It's very dangerous in our profession, but I'm going to do it anyway. Well, that means that I have to divide my attention a bit, because there are a few of you, like half of you guys, who have never worked with Spring Boot before. So I'll try to introduce it a bit, tell you what it's all about and what are the benefits and the drawbacks, obviously. And I'll try to focus a bit on the new features that Spring Boot version 2 brings. So it will be a kind of a hybrid approach this time. So let's get started. Lots to do. So Spring Boot. When you go to the website of Spring Boot, it says the following. Spring Boot takes an opinionated view of building production-ready Spring applications, and it favors convention over configuration, designed to get you up and running as quickly as possible. Well, we'll see about that in this talk, how quickly we can be up and running. So, in fact, the premise of this talk is also to put this to the test, this claim. Well, the key features of Spring Boot is that you can create standalone applications. So they don't, well, you can actually configure it to produce a WAR file, but you don't need to. And by default, it will produce a jar file if you build it with an embedded web server. And it tries to apply automatic Spring configuration wherever possible. So for example, in a classic Spring application, you would always have to use the component scan annotation to tell the Spring framework where all your Spring beans would be. In Spring Boot, this is done automatically wherever possible. So if you stick to the defaults, your components will be found automatically. Of course, when you don't want to stick to the default, you need some custom configuration. But in that case, that's your own choice. So this means it doesn't rely on any code generation, which is in which it differs from the Spring Roo project, the Spring Roo framework, which generates code all over the place. And also in Spring Boot, no XML configuration whatsoever. You can do fine just without it. And it's still trying to offer all Spring features. So there's not really a reason to choose the classic Spring framework anyway. Not today. So there are a few pros and cons, obviously. A pro is you don't need a separate web server, which also means that you can debug your application directly from the IDE, so there's no web server involved. You can just start up your jar file in debug mode. And also deployment gets very easy because you can just start copying your jar file to a remote server or to add it to a Docker image or just something like that. So no web server involved, not directly anyway. There are also no web XML classes, and if you don't need them, also no configuration classes. Again, if you want to change the default, then you would need to have them. In fact, you can be up and running with just one Java file and a build script. Well, of course, there are also some drawbacks. Like every library or framework must have a few drawbacks. And in this case, it will be custom configuration. Because most people use Spring Boot just by using the default. So if you have some exotic configuration or some requirement that nobody else has, it can be a bit of a puzzle. Now, I'm not saying that it can't be done, because I think it can, but it just needs a bit more time to figure it out. And I also wouldn't advise you to port your legacy Spring project to Spring Boot, because Spring Boot is designed to get you up and running quickly, like with a new project or like with a demo or proof of concept. So porting your legacy Spring project would mean that you would have to deal with all kinds of deviations from the defaults. So custom configuration all over the place. And of course, another drawback is that it uses Spring, obviously, which excludes roughly half of the Java community, because there are also people who don't like a Spring framework, or companies who have chosen to do everything the Java EE, or I should say the Jakarta EE way right now, because the name changed last week, I guess. So like half of the Java programmers and half of the Java jobs, there's no Spring involved anyway, so you can't use it. But I'll return to this statement at the end of the presentation. Okay, so what if we would start a project? What would we need? Well, I told you earlier that you can be up and running with just a build script and a Java file, one Java class. This is not exactly true, because you need at least 2 Java files. But you know, what's the difference, right? Of course, we would need a Java file to offer some functionality. So in this case, we have a very simple REST controller with one method that listens to the root of the web server, and it just returns a string. This one is a REST controller, and you would need an application class to do the quick assembly and to start up the whole thing with a main method, and you would need a build script with a few compilation dependencies. Well, everything you need would be right here. In this case, we've chosen the web starter, but you can choose whichever you want. There are a lot of them, and you would also need the Spring Boot Gradle plugin to make sure that all the functionality from their plugin is available. This will also work with Maven, by the way, but I've chosen the Gradle script in this slide. So I already showed you the Spring Boot Starter web dependency descriptor in the bottom of the slide. And there are all kinds of starter dependencies, actually, which are all meant to get you started as quickly as possible. There are a few, actually. And everyone actually inherits from this one, Spring Boot Starter, which is the core starter and is bundled with every starter dependency. This one includes logging and also auto configuration. There's a test starter to get you started on your unit test. Also includes Mockito and Hemcrest dependencies. This is the one that was on the slide, the previous slide, the web starter, which includes Spring MVC support. There's one for a JPA for Spring Data, and there are all kinds of variants that support Spring Data with all kinds of different implementations, so I'm not going to list them all here. But there's quite a good list. If I follow this link, and you can get an idea of all the starters that are available. It's a very long list, and this is a good thing because there's lots to choose from. So all these technologies that are listed here are supported through the Spring Boot starters, which means that if you use one of these technologies, you can get started very quickly with your application. So Spring Initializer, who has used Spring Initializer before? Yeah, a few people. Well, great. It's a web-based application by the Spring people that allows you to select your dependencies when you start your project and download like a template project, which you can open up in your IDE and you can start working right away. So I'll be using this application actually for our demo application in a few minutes. So I'll show you how it works then. Now, of course, Spring Boot 2 was released last month with some new features, so I thought I'd put in a few slides to talk about it. Of course, there were all kinds of upgrades. So Spring Boot 2 works with the Spring 5 framework with all the new features that are included in that. And this also means that there is a Java 8 baseline now. So if you want to use Spring Boot 2, you need to be on Java 8. There are a lot of reasons why you should be on Java 8, by the way, but this is also one of them. And Java 9 is also supported if you want to continue following the version trends. Well, Spring Webflux is a project that was released some time ago, which is Spring's reactive component. And this is also included in Spring Boot 2 now, so you can create your Spring Webflux applications using Spring Boot. And there is some HTTP 2 support for Tomcat, Jetty, and Undertow as web servers to make use of faster connections and, well, of course, using this HTTP 2 protocol anyway. So Spring Boot 1 used to have a Spring-specific metrics API. This has been replaced by micrometer-based metrics. And there have been various improvements to Actuator, which is the component by Spring that tells you the health of your application and can tell you all kinds of statistics that are then exposed via REST endpoints. And this has been improved greatly because it was very much tailored to Spring MVC. And this is, the Spring people write about it saying it's technology agnostic now. So it can be used also with other Spring components, like for example, Webflux. So it's not tied to MVC anymore. The Quartz scheduler library has been supported. So if you want to schedule jobs in your application, it can be done very efficiently using Spring Boot 2. And the auto configuration of Spring Security has been simplified a lot. So if you would want to secure your application with Spring Boot 1, you needed to specify exactly which paths would be secure and which would be anonymously available. And in Spring Boot 2, by default, everything is secured. And because a lot of people really wanted that to be the default setting, and of course you can override this and configure this yourself in your Spring Security configuration. But you don't really have to if you want to secure everything. And there are a few more new features. I'm not listing every new feature on the slides here, but these are the ones that I'm talking about in a bit more detail. So there's a component that creates animated GIF banners, which is so great I just had to show you. So I will in the next slide. And this was the one that I was looking forward to the most, Kotlin support. So build your Spring components using Kotlin. Full release notes are if you follow this link, you will get to the full release notes. Though there are a few more things, but these are the most important ones. Well, animated GIF support. That sounds great, right? So this is the demo project that I saw on the website. You just put an animated GIF somewhere, and it and if you run it, it will generate an ASCII version of it. I'll zoom a bit in a bit if you want to see it. This is just crucial to your company's strategy, right? Yeah, how will you ever get market-leading positions if you don't support these kinds of functionality? Yeah, so recommend these to your client anywhere if you want some animated GIF support. Get this project. To leave all the kidding behind us, Kotlin support really is something that I was looking forward to. Besides that it is possible to write your components in Kotlin now, there are a few other things, other characteristics of the Kotlin language that are used by the Spring people in a great way. For example, nullable information in Spring annotations. So imagine you're writing a Spring MVC application and you need to specify whether a request parameter is required or not. Well, in Spring Boot 1 and in the Spring Classic framework, you needed to enter this information in the request param annotation. So open up the brackets and say required is true or required is false. If you use Kotlin, you can use the nullable information. So you can just put this right there. You could just say request param name, string question mark. And in this case, it means not required because question mark in Kotlin means that the variable can be nullable, can be null actually. And if you leave out the question mark, it means the request parameter is required. So any request to that URL and you don't supply the name parameter will fail. Well, some of you guys may remember that classes in Kotlin are closed for extension by default. You need to explicitly tell some specific classes to be open. The Spring people have made sure that bean classes are open by default. And this means that all classes that are annotated with component and also async, transactional, and cacheable. If you use one of these annotations on your bean class, it means that Kotlin class will be open. And all the other ones will be closed anyway. So you can easily extend your own components, for example. And the last that I put up on the slide here is Kotlin-based Gradle build configuration. So you can use Kotlin in your Gradle scripts also. This is possible since Gradle version 4, if I remember correctly. But this also means auto-completion in your IDE. And also validation, which is a nice feature, I guess. Also, you guys are in luck, because as of today, tonight at 5 p.m., the Pivotal people will do a webinar on Spring Boot 2. I just saw this last week, and I thought I have to put this in my presentation. So if you get home this afternoon, very tired and weary from 2 days of conference, you can just keep going, you know. Put up this webinar and see what the Pivotal people have to say about Spring Boot. And I guess it will be a bit longer than my talk, so there might be even more detail in it. So if you're interested, go to this URL tonight at 5 p.m. I checked its right time zone, so don't worry about that. And learn even more about Spring Boot 2. Okay, what do you guys think? That it's been quite enough talking, right? So let's see some code. Let's see how this stuff works. And also, we'll see if the internet works. So I've put up a few online voting sessions, and I'm very curious to see if they will respond. So if you want to join in our vote, I'll start the session, and there will be a URL in the screen, and you can just visit it using your phone or your laptop. So just go to kahoot.it and enter the game pin that is shown on the screen. And you will enter the lobby, and you will be able to help us define the requirements for the demo application that we're building. So actually, you need to provide your own nickname, and it's good for you guys to know that I'm a Star Wars fan and not a Trekkie. So no Klingon chisel or, 7 of 9 or all those things. Unless you want to upset me, of course. So I have to admit, I haven't seen enough Star Trek to recognize names from it. So this could very well be a name from a Star Trek movie. I'm not even sure. Yeah, I think I've seen 1 or 2 or something, just enough to know what Klingon is. Okay, well, 30 people in the lobby. That's quite enough to get started, I guess. There will be a second version of the voting session in a few more minutes. So if you're missing out now, you can still join the next one. So there will be 3 questions. First question will be, what's the purpose of our application? So what do we want to build, actually? Because it needs to have a purpose, right? Everything really should have a purpose. So should we build a simple task planner? Should we build a craft beer catalog to keep track of everything that we've tasted so far? Or should we build a movie database to keep track of everything we have watched so far? It's up to you guys. Time's up, 27 answers, and the winner by far is a craft beer catalog. I get this every time, I'm not sure why. I'm only building craft beer catalogs. Anywhere I go, also in Barcelona, they also wanted a craft beer catalog. So what database should our Spring Boot application use? So relational with JPA, the old school way. Couchbase, Neo4j, MongoDB. Don't look at the picture because I just selected one randomly. Not trying to influence any votes or something. That would be nasty. So. Oh, it's a tie. It's a tie. I've never had this before. Relational JPA or Neo4j? I think we'll have to have a shouting contest, right? Who wants relational JPA? Yeah. Who wants Neo4j? Yay! Woo! Well, Neo4j is a clear winner. Thank God that we can still talk to each other, right? Otherwise, how would we ever solve this kind of deadlock situations? Yeah. No, I'm an IT guy. I don't. I think talking is very scary. So what language should we use? This is a new question, of course, because since Spring Boot, we can choose whatever. Java or Kotlin. The point really in this voting session is, I don't really care. Well, Spring Boot doesn't really care what you choose, and I do care because I had to prepare all these variations. But seriously, guys, Java? Really? Okay. Yeah, I don't care. I've prepared Java version even more times than the Kotlin one, So, but this is really the point, right? And when you get started, Spring Boot doesn't really care what you choose. And I care a bit because really I had to prepare like 4 times 4, 3 times 4, 3, like 60 versions of the talk. So don't do this ever if you actually have a life and nice hobbies. Yeah. Because I did it, you don't have to do it again, right? So. Okay, thanks for taking part. Then now we know what to do because we are doing Neo4j, building a craft beer application, and we're also going to use Java for it. So let's go to start.spring.io. Here it is. I'm choosing Gradle for this one. We're choosing Java and we're choosing Spring Boot 2, of course. Well, let's give it a group ID. Fox Days Vienna. Let's call our application Beers. Well, we're going to need the Neo4j dependency, and also I'm going to include DevTools. The people who have worked with Spring Boot before might recognize this one. There are a few features in here that enable you to do stuff like hot swapping and all those kind of things. So it's a good dependency to include. Now I'm pressing Alt-Enter, and it offers me a download that is the template of my my application. So let's extract this somewhere where I can find it, preferably. Development/Java, and I'll extract it right there. So let's fire up the IDE and import the project that we just extracted. So it was in C, development, Java, all kinds of projects that I've done before, of course. Here it is. This is the beers project, I guess. So let's open up that one. Let's use also import and my local Gradle distribution. So let's see what the Spring Initializer did for us. So this is the Spring Boot version, which is Spring Boot 2. Here's our group ID. Not sure what this is doing here. Let's get rid of that. Ugh. Right. Yeah, I know, right? Not sure why it does that. Okay, and it's also added, of course, our Spring Starter Data Neo4j dependency and the dev tools. So that's great. Well, if we really want to store some beers in our craft beer catalog, let's create a beer class. This should be the beginning, right? So there we go. Java class, which is called beer. I hope you guys can all read this in the Mac. Is it okay? Should it be a bit bigger? Is it okay? Yeah? Great, thanks. Okay. Well, a beer could have all kinds of fields, of course. So let's start off with an ID, which in the Neo4j database, they prefer a long value, so let's put a long in there. We also need to annotate this with ID, the Neo4j annotation, and also a generated value, because Neo4j will generate the ID value for us. Well, a beer can also have a name, of course, otherwise how would we know what beer we're talking about? So let's add a name, and let's also add a style. It could be lager or pilsner or quadruple or triple or whatever. And let's also add an alcohol percentage, so you know how many you can have before you need to get a ride or a cab or something. Well, with Kotlin we wouldn't have to do this, but in Java we need to generate some getters and setters, unfortunately. So here we go. Well, they're at the top. I don't really care. It works either way. Okay, and if we want to store these beers and read them from our database, we would need a class to access the database. So let's create a beer repository, which will annotate with the repository annotation from the Spring framework. And actually, I've created a class here, but we don't really need a class. An interface will do just fine, because Spring Data can generate a runtime implementation of it with all the common operations like find all and delete one and insert. So let's use that. We're going to extend from the CRUD repository interface, and it takes two generic arguments. The first one will be the entity type, which is beer in our case, and the second one will be the type of our ID field, which in this case is long. But for example, if we would have chosen MongoDB, we could insert object ID here or string. One of those two. Actually, that I used the CRUD repository. This is not the right one. Sorry. Mistake number one. Yeah, right. Will you guys keep count for me? We really need the Neo4j repository. So the CRUD one you can use when you're using Couchbase, for example. If we want Neo4j to work, we will need this one. Okay, and we will need another thing, which I have prepared before, but it would take so long to live code that I've prepared it. So I've created a secret config folder for Neo4j, and this contains an application properties file. So let's just open this up with Notepad and copy these. Copy these properties. There's already an application properties in our project, but it's empty. So I'll copy these in, and these are some, the username and password for our local Neo4j database. Well, speaking of that, the only thing that we need right now is the Neo4j database. So I'll start this up in a minute. And well, we'll also need a test class, I guess, because we need to be able to see whether insertions and deletions are working correctly. And also, I've prepared a test class. So, why is this not working? So let's find the test class anyway. We can also do it like this. We're using the beer one, so let's copy the beer test Java file. We can get rid of this one because it doesn't contain anything useful anyway. Let's paste it like this. Beer test. It will just test inserting a beer and finding it. So let's try to run it, and not sure if the Neo4j database is running anyway, so maybe I need to start it up. I'm not sure where it is installed. It's not running, I guess. Connection refused. I'm not sure where I installed it. Oh, I do remember, sorry. Like this. Like that. I thought it was right here. So would you guys mind if I switch to JPA right now or not? I've used Windows for quite some time now, and I asked my company if I could get a MacBook, and it's arriving in 3 weeks. So this is the last talk I'm doing on Windows. And after I installed the previous updates, my start menu stopped working. Have you guys had this bug? Well, maybe you're not using Windows after all, but so I can click on this, but nothing ever happens. Yeah. It's great. I use anything from Microsoft, right? So I tried to fix it before the talk, but it didn't work, and now I can't find my Neo4j database, and I know it's somewhere, and I can spend the next 15 minutes looking for it, but I don't think you guys want to see that, or do you? Not really, right? So what I'm gonna do, because it was a tie anyway, between JPA and Neo4j, I'm going to switch to the JPA version just for the sake of being able to show you something. And if you guys are interested, I can post a Neo4j version online after the talk if you want. So, I'll just generate a new zip file and copy the build script. That will be faster than looking up the other things. So if we want to use JPA, we need to add the JPA dependency and also an H2 in-memory database. So let's open up this one. And let's go to the build script, because that's really the only thing I care about. What's this? Oh, right, Windows. What's this? Please. Oh, this is terrible. It's like it knows that I'm going to a competitor, right, in a few weeks. So let's annoy you a bit longer, just for a few. Yeah, like this. Yeah, there it goes. Thank you. That's a good idea. Okay, I see I have 15 minutes, so I'm really going to speed it up right now. So let's hope that we get something working. Well, actually, it's a nice case because you guys can see how easy it will be to switch technologies, right? If you want to switch technologies in between. So I have, there's the H2 database one. I need to change my repository a bit because we can't find Neo4j anymore, and in this case we can just extend JPA repository. There we go. So this is actually quite nice because it figured out the dependency change all by itself. Something is wrong, but I can't see what. This one needs to leave. Bye-bye. And the long is okay, but we need different annotations. We need the JPA version of it. We need also a generated value, but then the JPA version of it, and we also need to annotate the class with entity. Entity. There we go. So what's wrong now? Imports again. Be gone. There we go. So let's run the beer test and see if this works. And while I run it, let's do the second version of the voting session, because I also need a few other requirements from you guys. This is the second one. So the mechanism will be exactly the same, but the game pin will be a bit different. You can use your old nickname if you want, or you can use Star Trek nicknames if you want to annoy me. That's also okay, because I'm not, let's face it, I'm not really going to do anything about it. Now, while you are assembling yourself in the lobby, I'll try to see what happened to the test we built. This is great. The test has succeeded, and it's because we use this in-memory H2 database. And what has the test actually performed? It has created a new beer with a name. This is one of the most famous beers in the world. It's from Belgium, and it's very hard to get. If you want a bottle, come see me afterwards. No problem, I'll get it done for you. Which is a quadruple, which is a very heavy beer, 12% alcohol. It saves it to the repository, which saves it to the H2 database. And after that, we can do a find. Oh, this is a bit ugly. We don't need a collection. We can actually use a list, which is a bit better, I think. Import list. This is a bit better. And it asserts that there's one beer in the database. So let's run it again, because I changed a few things. But I don't think it will fail anyway. So let's get to the lobby. Yes. I see, yeah. Like you, I do. Yes. Great. Thank you, Yoda. Let's start up the session. 35 players. So, depending on the answers you give, 3 or 2 more questions. First one is, what architecture should our app implement? Shall we use a single page application with REST controllers and an Angular front end, or should we use a Spring Web application with, so Spring MVC actually, with web controllers and a templating engine? If you're choosing the blue option, you know, the blue pill, speaking of great movies, we also have a question to choose the templating engine we're going to use. And the results tell me that we don't need that question, because we're doing REST single page application. So this means I'm going to skip this question, because we don't need a separate templating framework. Skip this one, and the only thing I need to know is what web server are we using. Again, the image doesn't have anything to do with the answer you should provide. Just vote according to your own preference. It's a pity I can't put up 3 pictures, right? There's only place for 1, so that's why it's right there. Time's up, and the answer has been Tomcat. Okay, thank you guys for voting. This means I can continue developing my application in 10 minutes, so I hope I'll manage. Okay, so we have chosen to create a single page application. In order to do that, we need to add a dependency, which is the REST dependency. Starter data REST, data REST. There we go. I don't care about your spaces. There we go. And it will get the dependencies needed for REST. Now we need, if we're building a big Spring application, we would create a service right now and a controller. This is a very small one, so I'm just creating a controller. It will actually just be a few one-liners, I guess. So if you're building a big one, please build a service later. But I'm not going to do it this time. We'll annotate this one with the REST controller. Also, we need a mapping, request mapping. And it will be, I like to prefix my REST services with REST, and then, for example, beer. But you can, of course, choose your own. Now, I will be hosting the Angular front end on a different port on localhost. In production, you can just export your Angular project and in a minified way include it in your Spring Boot resources folder. But just to be a bit more rapid, I'll host both on localhost, which means we need a cross-origin annotation to be able to tell Spring that requests from another port are fine. Just for this demo, right? And the Angular front end will run at 4200, so that's why it's there. We need to also wire our beer repository here, like that. And then we need a method to get all the beers. So we'll put this on in the get method and tell and create a method that returns a list of beers. List just one T, please. List of beers. List beers. And it will just return beer repository.find all. List import, please. There we go. I'll start up the Angular front end, which is, need to close this. No, bye-bye. Which is a bit more down the road, I guess. Development. Angular. Spring Boot beer. So I'm now telling the Angular 2 project to open up. You know, if I would have a bit more time, I would show you the Angular code. It's just very basic, some very basic views. And this is not a talk about Angular 4, so I'll put it up on GitHub afterwards, and you can see it for yourself. This is working to open the application. In the meantime, I can add a few more operations, because also we would need to delete beers if we really want to be able to work with it. So let's create a delete method here. Sorry, what? In the reactive way. You know, if I had a bit more time, I could do that. But I need to finish this one in 8 minutes. So is it okay if I post it up afterwards on GitHub? Is that okay? Or I can show you, you know, during the break or something. Yeah? So come see me afterwards, okay? Okay. When we are doing a deletion, we need to have the ID of the bear that we're deleting, which can just be sent using a request parameter. So there it is, and we can just tell the beer repository to delete by ID. Also, we need to be able to add new beers. So I'll tie this to the post HTTP method, which is a void, and it says add beer. And in this case, the whole beer is sent via the post method, so it's in the request body. So let's use the request body annotation. In this case, we just can save it directly because JPA will generate a new ID for us, like that. And actually, the edit beer method isn't so different because it also just needs to save it. So we need to tie this, in this case, to the put method. Let's call it edit beer. And actually, the implementation can be quite the same. Oh, I'll call it update beer anyway. There we go. Just need to create a run configuration. So let's add one, a Gradle one. Let's call it boot run, because that's the Gradle task that will create a jar file and run it. This is the project that we're using right now. So this project and let's call it boot run. Let's run it. In the meantime, our Angular frontend has started up. Now I've worked countless hours to get this into a very beautiful, slick user interface. I consulted a few user interaction experts, and my wife and kids haven't seen me for 2 weeks. And this is the result, so please tell me it's beautiful. Yeah? It's great, right? Yeah, I'm a backend developer, you can tell, right? Yeah. Yeah. So let's see if we have started up. We have, and actually the default web server is Tomcat. So if you would choose Undertow or Jetty, I could just add an exception to the dependency list in the build Gradle script. But in this case, it's already Tomcat, so that saves us some time. Because this is an in-memory database, everything was erased from the database. So let's add some beers. Also, this user interface really, you know, I'm crying inside when I see it. It's so beautiful. Yeah. So we need some test data. Also muss es ein Stiegel sein? Oder nein? Was ist gutes Bier? Gutes österreichisches Bier. Muss es ein Stiegel sein? Nein? What's a good Austrian beer, guys? Entschuldigung? Pilsner? Urquell. From Czech? Pilsner Urquell. Yeah, I've had this one a few times. From Pilsen, right? I guess it's like 5% or something. Well, let's send it. It's been added to the list, so that means that add has worked correctly. Can I add a favorite of mine? I'm from the Netherlands, and one of the best beers in the Netherlands is called La Trappe. And the triple is okay. Oh. You can see I've typed this before, right? Yeah. That's all I do with my spare time. Just add some beers to my own beer application. Which is a Belgian triple, and it's typically around 9% or something. So, okay. Ein Stiegel, muss es ein Stiegel sein? Das muss ein Stiegel sein, which is a lager, I guess. 4.9. Now let's add a beer that is not really a beer at all. This is the worst beer from my country. Do you know it? Ugh. Ugh. I suspect the factory people should just dip these bottles in the water of the nearby pool, you know, and just sell it like that. It's ugh. So this is not really a real beer, so let's delete it quickly. There you go, it's gone. So for all the guys who are thinking, or the girls who are thinking, this is just a front-end demo, it isn't, because if I do some things like this, Stiegel is not 4.9 but 4.8. It will actually send a request with the headers in it. If I select the right request, right, this is the put one. So I need to, payload, yeah, here it is. So it actually sends something. So we have, I have shown add and edit and delete also. So I guess it's really functioning well, right? Okay, well, I did manage, so let's wrap it up quickly because I'm running out of time right now. I'm going to skip this slide, but if you want to define your own queries, Spring Data has great support for custom queries. You can do it in a query annotation or also in one of the supported query methods that are also implemented at runtime. You can just define an interface method. So visit this link for more info. You can just define a method like this. Find by name, container, ignore case, and Spring Boot. So these names are quite meaningful. You need to provide them in the exact same order. And if we would have it more time, I would implement this one to implement a search function that just that can also work with a partial name. So maybe next time. Wrap up and questions. So Spring Boot gets you up and running fairly quickly, and it assumes standard configurations for rapid development, which is the reason why I was able to create the application in like 25 minutes or so. And it plays nice with a wide range of frameworks, as you have seen. Actually, it's up to the task no matter what choices you make, and you can even switch technologies halfway through your talk if you want. What if I prefer Java EE, or sorry, I need to call it Jakarta EE? I promise to get back on this point. Well, at least you can use embedded servers, because both the Wildfly-Swarm and Tommy embedded are implementations of web servers that allow you to run a jar file with an embedded web server. Just Java minus jar and provide your jar file and it will start up. And also, if you want quick assembly, like with the very small application class in the Jakarta EE world, there's been an interesting blog post on JBoss shrink wrap. So if you're into that, you should definitely need to check that out. Well, I'm afraid time's up. So if you have any questions, come to me after the talk, or I'll be here for the most of the day. So just talk to me. And if you just can't get enough, I'll post the slides on my webpage, which is right here. Or you can just follow me on Twitter. Thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for your attention, please. Okay.